Hey guys, subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the bell icon for the latest update.
The rook is a very powerful piece in chess, only second to the queen. The rook can move any number of squares horizontally or vertically. In this position, the rook on e5 can move anywhere along this fifth rank, any number of squares. It can then also move any number of squares on this e file. The rook can move backwards, forwards, and side to side. The only thing the rook cannot do is move diagonally and jump over pieces. A rook captures material by landing on the square that the piece is on. In this example, the rook here on e5 can capture 4 of black's pieces. Because the rook can move any number of squares horizontally, this rook can capture the rook here on b5, and when it does, the black rook is removed from the game. The white rook can also capture this pawn here on g5. Because the rook can move any number of squares vertically, it can capture this knight here on e3, or it can capture the queen on e8. The only piece on this board that the rook cannot capture is this bishop on d6. The rook cannot move diagonally. The rook on e5 cannot hop over material to capture any more pieces. The pawn on c5 is in essence protecting this rook on b5. The rook on e5 cannot capture this rook on b5. Also, this pawn on h5 cannot be captured because the rook cannot hop over the pawn on g5 and capture this material here on h5. And while the knight on e3 can be captured, the knight on e2 cannot be captured because the rook cannot hop over this knight here on e3. So as far as the material that the rook can take, the rook can still take this queen here on e8, the rook can take this pawn on g5, and the rook can take this knight here on e3. It cannot take this knight here on e2, this rook here on b5, the bishop here on d6 because the rook cannot move diagonally, and it cannot take this pawn here on h5. At the beginning of a chess game, the rooks are in the corner of the board, and none of them can move. Since the rooks cannot hop over material, they are blocked by both the pawn and the knight. It will take some effort on your part to make sure that you get these rooks involved into the game, because they are a very valuable piece and will definitely help you as you try to checkmate your opponent's king.
Who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bonnet.